notice that Oh, yeah, let's start that over because now we have to have it on wax. I like that part. Yes, you've noticed that Jay Johnson has been replaced. Now, this is just a temporary replacement. Jay is in a place that I can't pronounce, but Francesca can. But we're super glad that Francesca Amante is taking his spot today. Her fire is almost as high as Jay's. She's way more watery than he'll ever be. She is a coach, she's a speaker, she's a real estate person and a real estate investor. She's almost a dual citizen between our wonderful neighbors to the north. Sorry to those that we've treated poorly recently, and a little resident of the great state of Michigan as well. So let's please welcome Francesca Amante.
Thank you so much, Terry. What a beautiful introduction. And I just have to say, I know that no one's going to be introducing Terry, but I'm going to do a little shout out to him. I know that Jay is incredibly grateful to get to meet you each month here on this Lunch and Learn. Terry is an exceptional TEDx speaker, coach. He does all the things. And Terry, I just feel so honored that I get to step in today and be a part of this incredible energy that you bring to the table each and every month. So thank you for having me today. It's pretty special.
Excited that you're joining us. And I'm super excited about diving into today's topic. I am very high water, even though it's my second element. I'm almost in the dominant level there. And I think you're pretty close up to that top portion of it. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the good, the great, the maybe not so much the challenges that waters face, and we're going to look at it from in our lives, in our business, and in the people around us. So I absolutely love this. Francesca, incredibly organized, very thorough, has talking points. So I'm going to flip this back over to her. She's going to tell us where we're going to start. But as always, as you have questions, as you have comments, drop them in the chat and we will respond quickly and make this a wonderful conversation that's interactive for us all.
Oh, Terry, what a great topic for us today, diving into the depths of water, hey? I mean, I think the best place to start, Terry, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, and Jay would too, for those of you that are new to this call, that have never been on a lunch and learn, and perhaps you're like, what are behavioral elements? Maybe you're thinking, there's an assessment, it must be a personality assessment. So we'll backtrack for any of those that are completely fresh to this conversation. Behavioral elements is a little bit different than that of a typical personality assessment. For those of you that have taken any of the incredible personality assessments out there, what they are measuring is something a little bit different. That's going to be that of personality. For any of us, doctors say that our personality is concreted by the age of about 6 years old. And that's kind of the coloring map of what we kind of live our lives in. And when I found that out, I was just mind blown. I'm like, 6 years old. My gosh, did I not know who I was at 6? But that's often kind of where that template of our personality comes from. What we're measuring with behavioral elements is so different, and why I find it so fascinating is because it's all about growth and change. You may take this assessment at one point in your life, 6 years may go by, and you'll take it again. Depending on what team you've been working with, some of the skills that you've been learning internally, and your external factors, those elements may shift and evolve as you grow and change, because what we're measuring with behavioral elements is all about neuroplasticity, growth, change, adaptability. You, as Jay often says, is this who I am or is this who I'm choosing to be? And there's a really neat correlation between the two. So today, what Terry and I will be talking about is not that of personality. This is not, for those of you that are new, when we say water, fire, earth, air, this isn't astrology. It's all deeply based in neuroscience. And we've pretty much used these emblems as an easy way to remember that core drive of ours. And just because you're high in something doesn't mean you're good at it. Doesn't mean just because you're low in something doesn't mean you're bad at it. It just means that you have to put a bit more intentionality into that lower element. So now that we've kind of gotten that out of the way, Terry, we're talking about water. I mean, water is one of the core strengths of the whole behavioral elements. I mean, of course, every element plays such a beautiful role, but I would have to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, the people that are primary water, they're like a pillar, they're adaptable, they're empathetic. So we're going to dive into all of that. And I love how Taylor already put in the chat, prime example, I was high water being in trauma therapy. And then, that's now one of her least dominant drives, now high air. I love that. Talk about adaptability and change. So, um, Terry, why don't you share with us, like we both have secondary water elements. Terry, do you want to share a bit about what the water element is, and then we'll kind of dive in even deeper?
Yeah, for me, I look at water as being the highest form of empathy, for consideration, for compassion, and for genuinely caring about people as a whole, right? Oftentimes, water folks will put others' needs first, and we're going to talk about that as one of the challenges because I'm sure we both have examples of that, probably too many to list. But it's the one thing that really brings people together. From the book Driven, where this whole assessment was based on, they listed it as the drive to bond. And when they were doing the research, they realized that this particular drive was the last one that we formulated as human beings. And I think there's really good reason for that because human being evolution wasn't quite ready for it. And once we realized and accepted this drive to bond, I think that's when evolution really kicked into high gear because we're actually showing up for one another. Those that know me know that I started an organization called Motor City Connect, which was based on business networking. We met online and in the real world, and we had two words at the very top of our masthead, and those two words were better together. And that is something that all water people recognize.
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of ties into that quote, Terry, you want to go fast, you go alone. You want to go far, you go together. And I think that for some of the misconception with a lot of fire elements is, oh, they just want to go fast and they want to go alone. But I think that there's definitely an awareness that, yes, we can do that, but there's so much more fulfillment and trust and connectivity that we can have if we can bring that water element up to the surface and no pun intended, and really, embody that in everything that we do. So Terry, let's talk a bit about the power of empathy, both in leadership and in life, because I think that, for those of you, maybe perhaps Jay, his water is a little bit of a lower side. You and me have a little bit of the higher water element. Anyone that knows Jay, they would never actually anticipate that he has low water. We were just at a North American Academy in New Orleans, and a lot of the audience, when he did the behavioral elements training, their top guess was, Jay, you must be a water. He's incredibly good at bringing that water up to the surface. Again, no pun intended, but really bringing that forward, connecting, listening, and just being adaptable to meet the audience's needs and really care about how they're feeling. And just because that's a lower drive doesn't mean that he's bad at it, but he just has to put a little bit more intentionality into it. So perhaps for you and me, Terry, with our water being quite high with our primary element, how does that relate to you? You're high air and then backed by water. I'm high fire backed by water. How do you find empathy has driven your business, Terry? Because I'm sure that's had a huge impact in everything that you do day to day and the
It
connections that you built.
it colors it all, right? So, and it's a really nice combination to have this drive to learn. And because the water's so high and I care about the success of other people, anything I'm learning, I'm sharing and I'm trying to put it in a way that makes it relatable and understandable so people can leverage it. My high water is what drove me to want to be a part of the behavioral elements guide, right? It's like the thing that made it real. The air is what allowed me to conceive the idea of building an assessment that had the outputs of water, earth, fire, and air. But my water put me in a room with someone who knew Jay and said, why are you going to recreate a wheel that already exists? Go hang out with this guy. And I was like, heck yeah, because my earth is non-existent. So just because I wanted it, it may never have happened. I started it, but it wasn't going to be as good as what behavioral elements has because yeah, it's so important for people to be able to relate to others, to understand others, and most importantly, empathetically put themselves in the shoes of other people so we can understand, hey, yeah, maybe they're just having a bad moment or a rough time right now. and we give each other grace, we give ourselves grace, and continue to do the best we can. So I think empathy is hugely important as a leader, as a coworker, as a parent, as a spouse. It is really a great trait to bring into any relationship that you're trying to improve. How does it show up for you, Francesca?
Thank you for sharing that. It's so telling. And I mean, I just have to commend you. I mean, even with everything that you were talking about, and all of the different sectors, whether it be TEDx or your Motor City connections, it's evident that empathy is the driving factor, Terry, because anyone who meets Terry and walks up to him, it's, Mr. Rogers when he was alive, if you're familiar with him, what he was remembered for at his funeral was that when you spoke to him, you felt like you were the only person that existed in that moment. He was so incredibly intentional and present with every person. And Terry, I just have to say, you are one of those people that has this ability to, and I love the fact that your last name is Bean, because I feel like you're very much being in the moment. And you're such an example of a human being who just is present there and connecting so authentically. So I just wanted to do that little shout out to you because you deserve it. And as for me, how empathy has stemmed into that, I mean, for any of you that know a bit of my background, just the whole construct of how I was born after my brother's passing, growing up in an environment that grief and loss was definitely evident in my family. Some people would say, "Oh, I'm so sorry that you had to go through that," but instead, I counteract that. I go, "No, I'm so grateful I got to go through that because from a very young age, I got to become the observer. I got to observe my mom and dad through their grief and loss. I got to observe, even in school, some of the kids that felt left out, that were kind of on the sidelines. I gravitated towards them because I wanted other people to feel seen and loved and heard just as they were. Because I think from a young age, that was something that I was personally seeking to find my place in the world. And I think that's just kind of what I wanted to give to other people as an extension of that from me. And so now, as that translates out of my more personal life into my professional life, and as I moved into the corporate sector, how that ended up looking for me was just really looking around and saying, like, where are some gaps that I can fill that? Because I mean, I know in corporate it's very fast moving. There's a lot of fire and air, which is exceptional because the results are there. But what ends up happening, and it's true, Terry, you see it all the time. The results are there, but often sometimes the team can feel left out. They kind of feel unappreciated. And I've loved just getting to be this, I don't know, vessel of just, no, it's not about me. It's about really amplifying who are these people around me? How can I make them feel appreciated? Because when our team feels seen, heard, and just really valued for what they bring into the space, I mean, you see their performance just go from, 30 to 60 to 80 to 110. So that's kind of how that's translated for me. And, I guess because of where my path began, what was really great about it, Terry, was the fact that I'm now able to bring all of those, I guess, observational and empathetic skills into, I mean, my coaching clients. I mean, half of the clients that come to me, their biggest thing is, worthiness. Or like, Francesca, I know who I am in the corporate sector. I know who I am here. But me as a person, who am I without the title, without the desk, without the name tag? And really just tapping into that and helping them become their fullest self. And I know that I wouldn't be able to do that to the full extent I am today without that empathetic drive. So I'm so grateful for my water, even though I know there's people in the audience who are like, "Oh, I can't handle waters." I'm like, no, they have such a beautiful place. But I know that's a growing journey, and we'll get to that later on in the session. I hope that answers your question, Terry.
It does indeed. And I absolutely love what you said. And you're right. It is like the idea of who we are and that identity of how we show up in the world. And there are plenty of people that are like maybe a little bit water averse because they come off sometimes as a little touchy-feely, as a little too caring, as a little too put others first, and fire people and maybe some earth folks in particular don't really jive with that. Um, but it's such an important element in our wheel and in our world that I tell my clients all the time who are suffering from a difficult culture or a difficult conversation or dealing with difficult behaviors, if you just sprinkle some water on it, you're gonna be better off. So, talk to us a little bit about how water shows up and can positively impact and transform a corporate culture.
Absolutely. Terry, I think I'll share my example and then I want to hear yours. For me, One of the most telling examples of this was for a very long time before I fully stepped into the public speaking, coaching, and consulting world. I was right in the mix of luxury real estate and luxury developments for about 10 years. And there was one particular project that I got put on. I was on it for 5 years. I actually just concluded my contract with them at the end of 2023. When I stepped into that development, it was a 103 lot subdivision, beautiful area, heart of Kelowna. And when I stepped into this area, they had already had, 4 or 5 realtors in the project prior. And by the time I got hired for the project, it was interesting because the builders didn't really get along. There was, friction between the developer and the agents previously. There was friction between the builders and this and that. And I remember stepping in and I thought to myself, what these people are missing is connection. Of course, the builders are exceptionally talented, Terry. Oh my gosh, you see these homes, $2, $3 million homes. Beautiful. The location is exceptional. That wasn't the issue. When you talk to each of the builders individually, there was six, and you talk to them individually. They're empathetic, they're kind, they're driven, they're passionate, and they're so good with their clients. So and even the developers, incredible human beings, incredibly talented, phenomenal at what they do. But you have a conversation one on one to them, they're connected, empathetic, they're kind. And I thought, what's the missing piece here? Why are all the puzzle pieces not connecting? We all have these incredible qualities. Well, of course, the fire comes out in anybody. There's natural competition, friction comes up. What ended up being the missing piece, Terry, was that there just wasn't enough, I guess you could just say connection between all of the members. They didn't know how to jive as a family. They were all individually going at it because they thought that was the best way to survive. And so I came in, I said to the developers, I want to make a monthly meeting with each of the builders. We're going to take them for breakfast. We're going to sit them down. We're going to say, hey, how can we support you? We don't want them going to other builders or other people saying, hey, no one's supporting us. No, 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 you come to us. So we did these monthly brunch, and we'd take them for brunch, beautiful location, and we'd ask, how can we show up for you? What can improve your experience here? How can we help you get more clients? Then we would do like a monthly connective event with all the builders, asking, how can you support each other? Because there's going to be strengths, innate strengths that you have that another builder may not have, and you guys can play off of that. We had one builder that does mass construction. They order things in bulk. They're able to get lower pricing. There was another builder that they're a little bit more on the custom side. Everyone's going to adapt and attract a different type of figure, a different client. And in the midst of this, what they realized, they were like, oh, this client I just met last week, we can't really suit their needs. And instead of just passing them along to thin air, they were able to pass it off to the next builder and vice versa. The amount of business that came from this, Terry, there hadn't been any lots sold, but in the first, I think, 4 or 5 months of us doing this on the project, 11 lots sold. All of a sudden, the home started getting contracts and they started, I mean, the development now 5 years later is fully built out. It's beautiful. But they realized that they're like, wow, we were doing so much on our own and we forgot that we're so much stronger together, even though technically they're in competition with each other. So that was one of the, I guess, most interesting examples, getting to see that firsthand, and the evolution. By the time I left the project, the culture was, and this isn't about me, this is about how they all did this together. And sometimes us as leaders, especially as CEOs, or if you're a luxury development specialist, whatever your sector is, it's not about us. It's about planting the seed because they all have the skills within them to do it. It's just about us giving them that little bit of a nudge, and then the rest just falls into place. How about you, Terry? What do you feel?
Love it. I absolutely love it. In 2006, I was hired as a corporate recruiter for a telecom company here in the Detroit area. And during that time, I was reading our local business rag, Cranes Weekly, and they had the best of places to work. And in that time, I was like, I want to transform this organization into a recipient of that. And the financial tsunami hit and we ended up laying off 500 people. And the next month I got laid off and I was like, well, I guess I won't be doing that here. Fast forward a few years, 2020, I ended up taking refuge from COVID at one of my clients in the insurance space. I was the VP of sales and marketing, so I had a little bit of an authority, but I also had a lot of influence on this 20-person organization. And so that thought, best place to work, rekindled. And so they were my predecessor was high fire, high earth. The CEO is high fire, decent water, but high fire, loved to win, always wanted to win. Very, very winning culture, in fact. And when you get into a winning culture, that seems like a great place to be until you recognize there's a substantial difference between a winning culture and a growth culture, right? A growth culture celebrates winning and losing because they're going to learn from the latter. A winning culture certainly knows how to celebrate the victories, but they don't know how to celebrate or learn from the losses. It's the opposite of winning, therefore it sucks, and we shall never speak of it again. Um, and so what I learned and what I implemented was an awards program. I wanted to reward the people because what I know for a fact is when we appreciate others, they go out of their way to give us more to appreciate. So leaders, take heed. That's an important lesson that might add value to you. And I'm happy to report about 7 or 8 months later, we were selected number 21 on the list of 100 best places to work, right? And that was that water, that was that one-on-one attention, that was that time and understanding and caring that got brought to each individual on the team. I had that open door policy. And most importantly, I recognize and understand that, yes, I care about you as an employee. But if that's where it stops, I'm missing out because you're more than just an employee. You're 360 degrees of a human being, and the stuff that's happening outside of the office can certainly impact the stuff that happens inside the office. I'd love to see in the chat like a time where you've expressed some empathy or shown some appreciation or helped drive that culture by being a little more watery. Alternatively, I'd also like to read in the chat if you can't stand those watery types and you're like, ah, this whole conversation is bumming me out.
I love it, Terry. And when you were talking, one of the things that crossed my mind is one of those old quotes that talk about a river doesn't cut through rock because of its strength, it cuts through rock because of its persistence. And I think that if there's any misconception about water, they actually are quite strong. But one of the things that they're incredible at, and a lot of maybe fires and airs misinterpret about water is that they're incredibly persistent and they're consistent. They show up with so much heart and intentionality in all that they do. And yes, it may not be the fire that just blasts through the rock, but over time, the impact that water and that trust and that connection builds in a team and in a corporate culture, or just even in a personal relationship, it's powerful. And I mean, what you did, Terry, congratulations. That just speaks to it. It's evident. Um, and I think too, I mean, I'm so excited to see everything that comes through the chat. But I think that it's for any of you out in the audience, I know there's a couple of you, I noticed some names that are like, I'm not a big water person. That's okay though. I think the more that we're able, I think the missing piece is the word curiosity. The more that we're able to approach that aspect and the element of water with curiosity, there's so much that we can learn, because I think it's those that exhibit the opposite qualities of us. Even in a partnership. I mean, Terry, I know that you and your wonderful wife, Stephanie, you have correlating elements that do align. There's others that are complete polar opposites, and what you're able to build is such an incredibly strong foundation. And same in my partnership. My partner has very opposite elements of mine, whereas we do share the first element. But what that's able to bring is such a beautiful curiosity, even on a team of what is it that you can teach me? And Jacko Willing, the US Navy SEAL, he always asks that question, what is this here to teach me? So if you are a fire, an air, or even an earth in a team, and you're like, oh, these waters, they're too adaptable. They say yes to everything. Instead, take a step back and go, what are they here to teach me? What can I learn from them? Because I bet you, even if we can incrementally grow our adaptability in that water element just by even like a 0.1 or 2%, you just never know how that's going to impact your own performance and those around you. We have some incredible comments coming in. Look at this. Thank you, Mandy. Terry, I'll pass the baton to you. This is incredible. I love seeing these comments.
Yeah, I love what Mandy wrote here. Coming into my director role in the fall, I walked into a toxic culture where staff had no voice and trust was limited. After 5 months, we built a team that communicates, trusts one another, and focuses on the success of both the client we serve and the organization. I am a water for sure, but I feel from reading the styles I would be air as well. Yes, very excellent, Mandy. In that curiosity piece that Francesca referenced, to me, like all elements should embrace that, but that is innately air, right? That is like such an air thing. And woot woot, I'm a fan of air. I don't want to let go of Sarah's comment either. I am almost dead even between water and earth, and I see where my water is the dominant in my community impact and leadership, mentorship, volunteer work, whereas my earth becomes much more dominant with my job as it has to do with tax, immigration, and employment law compliance. That all sounds so earthy at the end to me that I may never want to know another thing about it. I'm kidding, Sarah. It's so earthy, though, for sure.
Oh, it's so good.
Yes.
And we have one in the private chat, and they're asking about so waters can become too adaptable at times. And I think that's such a great question. Yes, waters can become too adaptable at times. How can they kind of hone that, reel that back a little bit so that way they're not stepping into a full-on burnout, February at the start of the year. Do you want to start that off, Terry, or yeah, and then I'll.
I would be happy to. And this is such a great point because there's a few things that I've had to learn as a community-minded individual that no is not a four-letter word. It is a very, very important word to be able to use, to be able to mean, and to be able to stand by. But we have to remember that no doesn't have to mean never. It could be not right now, not that way, not with you, not the way you suggested it. We could come up with variations of no, no for me, but maybe yes for them. I'm a huge fan of trying to provide a solution, even if I'm not the one delivering the solution. So the better your network, the more you know people, the more you understand what folks are looking for, the easier it is for you to make a connection that when your no means no for you, it doesn't necessarily mean no to them. Your water is fulfilled. You're helping multiple people at once. You're being a good steward and servant of the community still. And you're not spending your time, your resources, your energy, or at least not as much on that particular issue. How do you deal with it, Francesca?
So well said, Terry. I would say for me, and this is something that I bring to my coaching clients, is really getting, and just to tack onto your point, getting very clear with what you're a yes for and getting clear what you're a no for. And that way, when those situations arise, it's that much easier for us to go, huh, I'm a no for that. Why would I say yes in this moment? It's really hard for us to reactively figure out what those are in the moment. But if we get clear, spend an evening or a morning being really intentional on what you're a yes and a no for. So when those moments arise, you're like, hey, that's actually a boundary that's being crossed. It doesn't align with me. Or hey, you know what? I'd love to, but not right now. This is not the right timing in this season of my life. So one of the things I get my clients to do, and actually I learned this from my business coach who I worked with for a year, Dan Martell, he wrote the book Buy Back Your Time. We talked a lot about energy audits. So I get my coaching clients to do the same. I say, I want you to look at your day from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep, do an energy audit. And this isn't so much about the incremental time. This is tapping into how our energy is being depleted or it's being energized. So I asked them, when you start your day in the morning, perhaps you scroll through social media. Sure, that may give you a little bit of a dopamine hit, but it's most likely draining your energy. Then maybe they talk to so and so or they get into whatever task. What are the tasks and the things that we're taking up most of our time? Often we're doing the things where when I explain it in a chart, I'll draw a circle and I'll put the yes and I'll say, what are you yes for? And they'll fill out that middle circle of all the things they're yes for. And everything of the no is around that circle. Often we're dancing around all the things that we're trying to avoid in the area of no. And we're not living in the area of yes in the slightest. We're dancing around self-doubt, disbelief, fear of failure, all the different things, guilt, shame, blame, and all the things that drain us. And it just takes two steps, just a step in, even just a slight little step forward into that circle of yes. And I start to see my clients go, I spent 3 hours doing this yesterday. It drained my energy. I never thought about it, but I perpetually and consistently do it and wonder why I don't see change. And as we know, the quote is, if you keep doing the same thing over and over and expecting change, it's just the definition of insanity because nothing, of course, is going to evolve or grow. And so I would say for me, Terry, that the greatest takeaway is the sooner that we're able to realize this, and it's even just that slight shift in our realization, now it mitigates burnout too. And Terry and I were just talking about burnout earlier this morning, and I recently did a talk on this, and we did a burnout audit. How often are we going for a walk? How often are we maybe taking a walking meeting? I mean, waters are often depleting their energy so deeply because they're filling everyone else's cup before they fill their own. And it's something as simple as saying, you look at a list, am I eating healthy food? Am I talking to somebody once per day that brings me joy? Am I doing something that's giving that energy back to me? And very clearly, then, when we start getting into this routine, when someone brings something to us that's clearly maybe it might be drama filled, it might be an energy depletion, it's so much easier when we're in that routine to say, you know what, I really appreciate this opportunity, but this isn't for me right now. Okay, we got more in the chat. How great. Terry, what are your thoughts on what I just shared and yeah, where to take that next?
I think that idea of the energy audit is so incredibly important, and it maps so well to the thing you said about understanding if it's a yes for you, if it's a no for you. When I work with my clients, we figure out what true north is, and then we build a roadmap to get to your true north. And we can have one for your business, we can have one for your brand, we can have one for your home life, right? You can have multiple true norths, but we can only really truly focus on one at a time. As much as we all think we're phenomenal multitaskers, science proves otherwise. Our brain's not wired for multitasking. We can switch, but we can't do 12 things at once. So understanding where true north is, it becomes a real quick, does this help me get there? Yes or no. So when I work to prioritize my clients' days, it's here's your to-do list of 487 things, 300 of which have been on your to-do list for like 3 years because you never scratch it off because you don't make the time to do it. Because you've got 187 other things that you have to do. I break it down into three piles. This is your do now, this is your do next, and this is your do never. And the more we can dump into do never, the more likely we are to be able to move forward without the shame and without the guilt and with all the negative energy that's put into, I didn't get this completed again, right? Because that's a real thing that we carry with us. Stop beating yourself up about stuff that you really didn't need to do in the first place. Now I'm your life coach. Check me out.
Yes, call Terry. Oh, I love that. And also, we got some more people in the chat saying, "Oh, okay, amazing. My recommendation is also to try to enhance other elements." I love it. Yes, to create that balance. Well said, Terry. Taylor. Oh, and I love what you said. Was Francesca's cup half full or half empty? I love it. And perspective's huge, right? I think in the midst of, especially those of us in the audience that do have either high secondary water or just high water as their primary, our negativity bias does come into play because we're so focused on helping everyone else. We often become really, really hard on ourselves. And I think looking at the glass, and it's less about is the glass half full or half empty, but recognizing that there's a pitcher of water beside us. Even if there's a tiny little drop, you have a tiny bit of water left in your glass. That is one, an incredible blessing. And number two, it gives you something to work with. So you may be depleted to your last drop, but you have a drop to work with, and you can replenish your cup and just say, hey, you know what, I got to give this energy back to me. Terry, one of the things I thought we could talk about was water's incredible adaptability to change. Because yes, of course, there's an aspect where they can give too much. strength and a weakness, a blessing and a curse. But how about their adaptability to change? Because I think waters have this innate strength in doing so. What's your perception of that, at least for you in your personal experience?
I just had this conversation on a podcast yesterday about the importance of recognizing that change is one of the very few constants that we're all going to go through. And too often, people are fighting and pushing back against change when the reality is the more you can accept it, the more you can embrace it, the more you can deal with it, the easier it is to get through. And if you know change is inevitable, why would you want to go kicking and screaming against it? So we need to accept that that's part of our reality and part of our shared experience, and we need to just embrace it, or at the very least, stop fighting it. It's so much energy to push back and hold it off, especially when it's coming at you like a freight train. Yes, there are times when change happens from the worst situations, right? Francesca's personal story of what she went through. Many of us have lost positions. Many of us have had parents that have divorced. Some of us have divorced ourselves, right? Some of us have had great aspirations and dreams. And next thing you know, you broke a leg and everything's put on hold. Things happen that we have to adjust to that are very negative in nature. However, and I wrote this in my last book, life is nothing more than a series of pats on the back and kicks in the gonads. And the only thing that matters is how you respond to each. So the response is where your power is, not the cause.
Terry. And I think that there was a speaker years ago. He did this talk on how life sometimes will feel like, there's a pebble thrown at us, and there's a lemon, then there's a watermelon, then you feel like, there's a boulder being thrown at you. Next, you feel like there's a house really falling onto your house, hypothetically speaking. And it's so interesting because I think that in terms of water's adaptability to change, as much as yes, subwaters may be a little bit slower to make decisions because they're more on that structured side of things, but there's something so powerful about seeing a water in their power, really just saying, no, like I've got this. I will dodge that boulder or I'll let it fall on me and ask myself, okay, like that hurt. How can I do that better next time? It's incredible watching that in action. And some of the leaders that I coach that are very much high water, especially we see that in the healthcare industry, we see that in teachers, predominantly as well. It's just so incredible seeing how their empathy is that driving factor that allows them to adapt and change because they have this, they're not thinking about themselves, they're really thinking about everyone around them. And there's such a strength in that because it's almost like their empathy helps them go, well, I could have it way worse. Sarah yesterday or Bob yesterday went through this and they got through it. I can get through this too because they're not fixated just on what's in front of them. They're so innately in tune with those around them that they're able to have this just compassionate understanding of this will make me better. And I just think that's such an incredible trait that they have.
I agree, right? And a rising tide lifts all boats, right?
Yes.
And, it's fun that we're talking about the tide and boats, which really belong on water almost exclusively. But it's so true. And I think water people not only understand, but they embrace that.
And it's interesting, Terry. I was recently at this academy. Jay was there as well, and there were some of the participants in the audience that are very, very high fire, just like Jay. And their water is almost minuscule, but it was so beautiful watching them. Even though some of them may admit, "Yeah, I've got no water in me." Just getting to observe their adaptability with other people. How much by the fourth or fifth day of this academy, how much I got to witness that water come to the surface, and it was beautiful because I think to them they're fixated on nope, this is my element, I've got no water. But as we say, just because we're low in it doesn't mean that it's not there. And these are some of the core people that brought the team together, that lifted people up when they were having a hard time, or at 2 in the morning when they were working on one of their final projects. They were the ones going, you guys got this, come on, we can do this. And I'm like, that's just a prime example of just because you're low in an element doesn't mean you're bad at it. It just might take a bit more intention, but I think if we get less fixated on labeling ourselves and really keep with that neuroplasticity of I'm going to grow, I'm going to evolve, I mean, even that particular individual, I was just so impressed by their performance and really stepping into that role. Terry, one of the things I thought would be awesome to talk about would be trust in teams, because I think, and we kind of tapped on this earlier, but I mean, you've seen it, I've seen it. Waters are, yes, we say like they're the emotional ones or whatever. We can say that about ourselves, but I mean, let's talk about how much trust this builds in teams and how that transcends to so many different parts, even in a personal relationship.
I don't know if this is true for all waters, so I'll put it out to you, Francesca, and those of us on this chat. Um, I'm a big fan of giving people enough rope to hang themselves. And what I mean specifically by that is you have all the trust from me inherently, naturally, day one, until you blow it and give me a reason not to trust you. And I know that there are people who are wired diametrically opposed to that, who you have to earn trust. Do you? I think by being human and showing up and being a good person, you did all the work to earn it already. Now it's your opportunity to screw it up. Do people agree with that or not agree with it? What do you think, Francesco?
And everyone, drop your answer in the chat. I would both Terry and I would love to see your thought perspective on this. I'm the same way, Terry. It's one of those things where when I meet people, it's a fresh slate, it's a clean slate. And I think also too, there's aspects in my life where there's certain people I've met years ago and I've reconnected with now. They get a fresh slate because I'm not the same person I was 6 months ago, let alone a year ago, let alone 5 years ago. Like again, about that adaptability and that growth, as long as we're continually working on ourselves on the internal, we're never the same. So I think it's really just, and I love how Taylor just put in here about, oh, we'll get to that comment, fabulous insights. But to finish my thought, it's one of those things where, exactly like you said, Terry, I will give people the absolute trust, and then it's their decision as to if that trust remains or if it falters, but also recognizing that we're human beings. None of us are perfect, and there's going to be moments where, yes, we may lose a little bit of trust in other people. I think that the aspect of it, I think this is where waters really hone their strength. And Terry, maybe you've experienced this too. Waters have this ability, maybe unlike fires, where it's like, you broke my trust, you're done, we're done. But waters have this beautiful ability to say, you know what? I'm going to go to them and I'm going to approach your curiosity and say, Bob, I know, I see how you show up. I've watched you for the last 2 years. What you did on Saturday really broke my trust. I want to rebuild that with you. You may not have even realized this was a gap or a blind spot. How can we work on that together? Bob might go, well, screw you, blah, blah, blah. But Bob might also say, you know what? Thank you for bringing that to my attention. That is a gap. How can I show up better? Well, there you have something to work with. And that's where the waters, instead of cutting them off, have this beautiful ability of saying, you know what? Bob and I are going to work towards this and incrementally over time build that trust again. Terry, let's dive into the chat. This is so good. I love seeing these comments.
Yeah, read
Um,
what Taylor said.
she says, I'm like that too. However, I could keep my reality check that they could hurt me or impact me or make me not trust them. Taylor, I just want to touch on that. That's such a good point. And I think sometimes we shoot ourselves in the foot because that is good to have that at the back of our mind. But sometimes it can trip us up a little bit too much for us to be so hyper conscious of everyone and not just be able to be present, because it's kind of like going onto a plane and go, oh my gosh, there were so many plane crashes recently. I might crash. Or you can go on the plane, enjoy your ginger ale, look out the window. If something's going to happen, it'll happen. But if we're on the high alert all the time, it takes away from the experience. That view is going to look scary. It's not going to look beautiful. And I really don't want that to take away from your. And I love what Taylor says. Yeah, it's a trauma therapy for a reason. I love it, and that's just incredible self awareness. Terry, what's your thoughts on that?
I think it's really important to understand that we do need to extend grace to people. One of the things that I thought about when I first read Taylor's post is it's roughly 75% of the things that we spend time worrying about never happen, right? So we put up our guards, we protect ourselves, we have our little wall. I don't think Mexico is going to pay for it, but we have our little wall, and we're all surrounded by these things to make sure nobody gets in and penetrates our inner sanctum. And we cut people off without giving them an opportunity to truly show us who they are and what they can do. And so I'm always a little concerned about that. What did I miss out on because of not trusting people innately? But I certainly appreciate that. And I saw in Caitlin's post, I try to be trusting until they give me a reason not to. I have been burned a few times, so I try to be guarded a bit at first. And I get it. I did listen, and it's the beautiful thing about having high water is we can just dump some water on the burn and cool it right off, right? It doesn't last long. When we leave the house, my wife says, turn the dryer off. And I'm like, okay, why do we have to turn the dryer off? But we can leave the washing machine on. And she's like, well, the washing machine has water in it. The house can't catch fire from the washing machine. And I'm not an electrician. I have no idea if that's right, wrong, or whatever. But it's an interesting thought process that water really has that healing energy and can help us get over any type of burn.
Oh, what a great analogy, Terry. I love that. Please thank your wife for that one of the the washer and the dryer. Caitlin says, I love that. Pour some water on it. How true. Now, Terry, for you, I mean, you're predominantly air. I'm predominantly fire. We've got our water secondary. You and I were actually on a call maybe a couple months ago with Jay, where we ended up having a conversation all about how powerful that secondary element is and really bringing that to the surface more. So with us both being secondary water, how does that show up for you, that beautiful combination of the air and the water? Tell us a bit more about that.
I think it does. It drives the world I'm in, right? As an air person, it would be really easy to go be an inventor or a creative type or a creator of things that the world needs. But there's that disconnect. It is a high air, and I'm a pretty high air, that if you're not thinking about and concerning yourself with the people, then you're going to be off in a vacuum doing your crazy wild hair Einstein-y stuff. And maybe you're not figuring out how it best serves others, why it matters to the populace as a whole. And so instead of going that route, I ended up doing the training, the keynote speaking, the coaching, because I want to take this innovation, make it relatable so we can, raise those ships. And I am certain that that's the water element in me. And I was on doing an interview earlier today, and I said, in my heart, I'm a teacher, I'm an educator. And so it makes sense that the water is as high as it is because I have a long lineage. I'm adopted, but most of my natural born family, father, mother, grandparents, all teachers and educators, and I don't know how far that lineage goes back, but it's that piece that I think matters is the idea of elevating others. How about
Absolutely.
you? How does it show up and how does it complement fire? Because sometimes I think, the opposite of fire kind of has to be water. So are you like conflict? Does it show up as conflict from time to time, or is it like it just makes your fire even more? How does that work?
I love it, Terry. You know, it's funny because I remember it, I just want to mention Taylor's comment because it'll tie into what I'm about to say. Taylor says, once I paid for my assessment, it opened my eyes because it went from just showing her her primary element to showing all of them. And when she saw that what her second element was, it was a game changer. Taylor, thank you for that. And you know, it's so funny because when I first did the free assessment years ago, it came up as fire. And I was like, I clearly entered all of that in wrong. I didn't believe it. As the years went by, I did it again, but I paid for the assessment this time. And I saw that again, it came up as primary fire, but my secondary was water. And I was like, huh, maybe they're onto something. And here's what was interesting. So, Terry, from a young age, I've been the empathetic one that's the listener, the observer, the one that wants to just make things peaceful and calm for people around me, especially through what my parents went through with the grief and loss. So I just assumed I was like, no, I'm a water. I won the most conscientious award all the time in figure skating because I was or sportsmanlike because I wanted to be there for those around me. I did win a lot because I worked my butt off, but my primary focus wasn't winning. I wanted to be the best I could be in that moment and be better than the person I was the previous day and to be a better skater, a better dancer. That's what drove me. So I just assumed I was like, no, I'm a water. But then I started to really think about it. And of course, Jay helped me get to this conclusion that if I start to look at my life, still my primary drive though is to win. It may not be for money, it may not be to be better than others, but it's winning to be better than the person I was the day before. And that was something that I really like, it clicked for me because I was like, no, like I'm not all these qualities of a fire, but I am. It's just it's driven in a different way. And because my water is quite high with it, like I'm talking fire and then the water, and then we got the air and then we got earth way down here. But it was so fascinating to really tap into that and do some internal reflections of yes, my drive is to win, but I want to win having people around me feel secure, happy, loved, seen, heard. So it's winning, but it's just in a very different way. And I'm saying for you, Terry, when I observe you, being that high air, it's definitely one of the CEO, elements for sure. But you're one of those leaders that really brings in that connectivity and you're winning all the while of making other people feel and educating people while making them feel seen and appreciated. So that's how it shows up for me in my life. And I think that's why when you look at even in my real estate journey, when I concluded that decade in real estate, I did sell a lot and I won the awards for sure. But when people would ask me, like, how many people did you sell houses to? I didn't know the number. I just knew, oh, well, Sue and Bob had this incredible experience and they finally got to have the keys to this home. And it's more about the people than it was the other aspect. It was just my winning drive looked a little bit different. So now, as I tap into the public speaking and the coaching world, when I get up on stage, of course, I have a drive to make sure my talk is concise and it's valuable to those in the audience. But really, that water comes up, and I want just even one person in that audience to deeply be moved to maybe shift something that will make them a better person tomorrow than they were today, if that lands.
And that is the only real competition there is. Am I better than I was before? And I love that perspective. That's why golf is so fascinating. That's why other competitions are too, even team sports, right? If we did better than last time, that's what matters. And so I love that approach. What's we talked a little bit about some of the downside of water, and I don't really want to end this on a down note. So let's be super quick about this. How does your water get you into trouble, Francesca?
Oh gosh, okay. I give everybody the benefit of a doubt. And like we talked about earlier, in terms of that grace and that space for people to grow and evolve, this has gotten better as I've gotten older. But I think, especially in my early 20s, I gave people not only in the corporate sector, but I was working in the corporate field even from the age of like 18 with people thought I was in my 30s, but I was 18 years old. And I gave everybody the benefit of a doubt. That's definitely one of the ways that my water, um, kind of played a little bit of took a toll on me. And one of the other ways too, I would say, Terry, would be over adaptability. I was just the yes man. Absolutely, I can do that. Now it's different, and I think that I always thought as a someone who's going to be successful in the workplace, if I'm saying no, it means that I'm not willing to grow and evolve, and it's actually the opposite because the more respect I've gained as I've gotten older in the corporate field is when I'm able to say no, but here's why, and here's how we can actually adapt that to make it better. So, and I guess it's more of like a yes and. So I'm still saying yes in a way, but I'm doing it in a way that honors myself, my values. And in addition to that, making sure that just because, yes, I could say yes to that, but why am I saying yes to that? And I think, there's that book, Why Behind the Why. And I think that if more waters in the audience today started to ask themselves, what's your why? I didn't post on social media for like 8 months in the last year because I really got deep into why am I posting? I'm now posting again on social media because my why is clear. I'm not doing it for the reasons I used to. It's very, very different as to why I'm sharing that information, what impact I want to put out into the world. It's so much more intentional. Terry, how about you? What are some of the water downfalls for you?
I think the biggest one is a lack of discernment and the idea that everybody's like me, right? That everybody has the same values, the same belief systems, the same desire to serve. And I'm not saying again, don't put up necessarily big, huge walls, but when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. right? We need to learn lessons about folks faster because we're so good at people pleasing. We're so good at giving others the benefit of the doubt, and we're so good at putting ourselves last. When we talk about being a people pleaser, put yourself really high on the list of people that you are going to please and make time for that on a regular basis.
And I love Caitlin just put in the chat. I'm working on over adaptability right now. This has been so hard for me. Sarah says a list of ways my water gets me in trouble is as long as the word Mississippi. Oh gosh, that's so good.
It's
And I
so good.
that's awesome.
I,
And I
I
think
laughed. So when the video shows up, if you're watching this on replay and Francesca's going through this beautiful illustration and I'm laughing, it was because the way my water gets me in trouble as long as the Mississippi.
right? Oh my gosh. And for any of you in the audience, some of you may be, predominantly earth, or maybe high fire air, or maybe you are a high water, just like Caitlin and Sarah in the audience. I love what Sarah said. It's my fault. I own it. For any of you in the audience today, I think what you can take away from this call today is if you are high water, really start to get clear on what you're a yes for, what you're a no for, and remember that you have so much strength that you bring into the workplace and into your personal life, and the people around you are so lucky to have you. And for those of you that don't have that high water, and maybe you're like, oh, a little bit water averse, look at it as, like Jocko Willink says, what is this here to teach me? What can the waters of the world teach me? And how can I be a little bit more watery today, even by 1%? Maybe you'll make a little bit of an impact, even more than you already are on those around you, both in the corporate world and in your personal life. How about you, Terry?
I think what you were saying is so spot on, right? Again, I go back to that true north piece. That informs our decision making. That informs who we let in closer, who we keep at an distance, in the actions that we're going to take. So finding that clarity. Don't be like some muddy swamp, right? Be this crystal clear turquoise Caribbean where you can see the sand 40 feet down. Work on yourself till you get that level of clarity, and your water will never steer you wrong because you'll be aligned to who you truly are, and you'll show up powerfully and bring strength and be persistent and consistent. And again, that showing up for others and yourself is super important.
Well said, Terry. I wish that I mean, it's 11 o'clock already. My goodness, right on the dot. Terry, thank you for this exceptional conversation. I know Terry and I could be here for 3 hours talking about any subject, but we just want to say thank you to all of you in the audience, all of the chat, all of the incredible questions, so many of these participants being here present. What an honor. And Terry, thank you and Jay for having me today. I feel so grateful to be here.
Taylor, I want to answer your question. You both talked about some exercises to identify the yes. Is there anything that could help? Absolutely. And Francesca did a great thing about the energy audit, right? So I look at it from the perspective is this get me closer to where I want to be? Is this effort and energy worth my time? Is this going to serve people I care about? The more yeses I have on that, the easier it is to say yes to. The more no's, right? If you're 0 for 3 on that, it's a hard no. I always use the line, if it's not a hell yeah, it's a hard no for me, right? And so getting that level of clarity, and does it bring you fulfillment? Does it bring you closer to who you want to be? Does it bring you closer to people you want to be around? What would you add, Francesca?
I just want to say everyone in the chat's been saying thank you, Terry. Oh, Sarah's comment. She says it was nice to have me on today. I'm glad I can be the spot on or the fill in for Jay. Thank you. And Sharon says very informative webinar. It's a pleasure for us to be here. And Terry, to what you were saying, yeah, you're spot on with that information. It's funny. Someone says in the chat that don't be a swamp. Don't be someone's swamp should be on a t-shirt. I couldn't agree more. And I think one of the things that I have gotten so clear on, no pun intended, with the clarity aspect from my business and personal coaches is this: when we shift the internal, the external shifts around us. So the more that we work on ourselves and get so clear on what that yes is, what a no or no is, what our purpose is, and really being clear on that, everything around you starts to shift because you're going to start to amplify the things around you that you want instead of the things that we maybe don't want. So, but Terry, I wish we could sit here for hours. Thank you for an exceptional talk and just for being an incredible co-host.
Thank you. It was a pleasure indeed. I look forward to seeing you soon, and we'll be back here the second Tuesday of April. Looking forward to it. Have a great day, y'all.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.